The CEO's black Mercedes pulled into the gravel parking lot of Rosa's family kitchen for the 7th week in a row, and Clara Romano watched through the kitchen window with flour-dusted hands pressed against the stainless steel counter, her heart doing that strange flip it had been doing every Thursday at exactly 6:15 for the past month and a half. "He's here again," her mother announced unnecessarily from her position at the stove, where she was stirring a massive pot of marinara sauce that had been simmering since dawn. Rosa Romano had run this restaurant for 32 years, ever since Clara's father had died and left them with nothing but recipes, debt, and a dream that refused to die. The place wasn't fancy. Red checkered tablecloths covered mismatched tables. The walls were decorated with family photos going back 3 generations, and the menu hadn't changed since 1994. But the food was honest, made with love, and apparently good enough to keep bringing back a man who clearly had enough money to eat anywhere in the city. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and peered through the small circular window in the kitchen door. Marcus Everett was already settling into his usual table by the window, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that her brother kept meaning to fix. He wore another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray, and he was already loosening his tie as he picked up the worn, laminated menu that he had to have memorized by now. "Maybe he just really likes your lasagna, Ma," Clara said, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. Rosa made a dismissive sound. "Nobody drives 45 minutes every week for lasagna. That man comes here for a reason, and unless I'm losing my mind in my old age, I think that reason has something to do with my daughter who keeps hiding in the kitchen." "I'm not hiding. I'm working." Clara pulled a tray of fresh focaccia from the oven, the rosemary-scented steam rising between them like a fragrant barrier. "We have customers. Someone has to actually cook the food. We have 3 tables tonight and 2 of them ordered the spaghetti special. I can handle it." Rosa pointed her wooden spoon toward the door. "Go take his order." Clara felt her stomach tighten. "That's Sophia's job. Sophia called in sick, remember? And Marco is in the back doing dishes." Rosa's dark eyes, so much like Clara's own, softened slightly. "Baby girl, you're 26 years old. You can talk to a customer." But Marcus Everett wasn't just a customer, and they both knew it. Clara had noticed him the first time he came in, back in early January on a night when the restaurant had been nearly empty due to a snowstorm. He'd been soaked from the walk from his car, his expensive coat dripping onto their old linoleum floor, and he'd apologized profusely while she brought him towels. He'd ordered the chicken parmesan and a glass of red wine, and he'd eaten slowly, almost meditatively, while reading something on his phone. She'd thought he was just passing through, maybe lost, definitely out of place in their working-class neighborhood where most people drove trucks, not luxury cars. But then he'd come back the next week, and the week after that, always Thursday, always 6:15, always alone. Clara had served him that second time, her hands shaking slightly as she poured his water. He'd been polite, almost formal, with a deep voice that seemed to carry the weight of important decisions. He'd asked her about the family photos on the walls, and she'd found herself telling him about her grandparents who'd emigrated from Italy, about her father who'd dreamed of building something lasting, about how this restaurant was everything her family had. He'd listened like every word mattered. And when he left, he'd tipped 50%. Now, 7 weeks into this strange ritual, Clara had started to wonder what would happen if she actually asked him the question that kept her awake at night. "Why do you keep coming back?" "Fine," she said, untying her apron with jerky movements. "I'll take his order." Rosa smiled triumphantly and turned back to her sauce. Clara smoothed down her dark hair, which was probably a disaster after hours in the hot kitchen, checked that her simple black dress wasn't too wrinkled, and pushed through the swinging door into the dining room. The restaurant smelled like garlic and fresh bread, and the faint vanilla from the candles her mother insisted on lighting even on quiet nights. An elderly couple sat in the corner, longtime regulars who came every Thursday before Marcus started his visits. A young family with 2 small children occupied another table, the kids coloring on the paper placemats Marco had set out. And then there was Marcus, sitting alone by the window with late winter darkness pressing against the glass behind him, making him look like a figure in a painting. Clara approached with what she hoped was a professional smile. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up, and the moment his eyes met hers, she felt that same jolt of awareness that had been getting stronger each week. His eyes were a deep brown, warm and intelligent, with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor typically revealed. "Good evening, Clara." He always used her name, and the way he said it, carefully and with a slight emphasis, made it sound important. "Water would be great, thank you, and I think I'll try something different tonight." That was new. "Oh, you usually get the chicken parmesan." "I do." He set down the menu and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "But I've been coming here for almost 2 months, and I've only tried 3 dishes. That seems like a waste, doesn't it? What would you recommend?" Clara's mind went blank for a moment. "Well, the special tonight is braciole, beef rolled with herbs and cooked in tomato sauce. It's my grandmother's recipe, and it takes about 6 hours to make properly. My mother starts at mid-morning." "That sounds perfect." He closed the menu and handed it to her, his fingers briefly brushing against hers. The contact lasted maybe a second, but it sent warmth shooting up her arm. "And could I get a glass of the house red?" "Of course." She scribbled the order on her pad even though she'd remember it perfectly well. "It'll be about 15 minutes. I'm not in any hurry." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Clara," she looked back. "Yes." He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "How's the new oven working out?" She blinked in surprise. 3 weeks ago, during one of their brief conversations while she cleared his plates, she'd mentioned that their main oven was dying and they were trying to save up for a replacement. She couldn't believe he remembered. "We're still saving," she admitted. "But we're getting there. Another few months, maybe." He nodded slowly, something thoughtful crossing his face. "That's good. You can't run a restaurant without reliable equipment." "No, you really can't." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for asking." "Of course." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something approachable and genuinely kind. "I'll wait for the braciole." Back in the kitchen, Clara found her mother watching her with barely concealed interest. "Well," he ordered the braciole special. Clara went to pour his wine, grateful for something to do with her hands, and he asked about the oven. Rosa's eyebrows shot up. "The oven? You told him about the oven. It came up in conversation a few weeks ago." Clara carefully filled a wine glass, making sure not to overfill it. "I don't know, Ma. He asks questions. Real questions, like he actually cares about the answers. That's because he does care." Rosa began plating the braciole with the kind of artistic precision she brought to every dish, surrounding the rolled beef with roasted vegetables and a generous ladle of sauce. A man doesn't drive across the city every week and remember details about ovens unless he's interested. Maybe he's just nice. Nice men exist, but nice men who look like that, dress like that, and drive a car that costs more than our annual revenue. They don't spend their Thursday evenings in family restaurants in middle-class neighborhoods unless something is drawing them here. Clara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks now. turning it over in her mind during the day while she prepped vegetables and kneaded dough, lying awake at night trying to figure out what a man like Marcus Everett could possibly want with a place like this, with a woman like her. She delivered his meal and tried not to hover, but she found herself watching from behind the counter as he ate. He took his time with the food, cutting small pieces and chewing thoughtfully, occasionally closing his eyes as if savoring each flavor. It was the opposite of how most people ate, rushed and distracted. Marcus ate like the meal mattered. When she brought him more bread, he asked about her day. When she refilled his water, he mentioned an article he'd read about family-owned restaurants surviving in the age of chains and franchises. When she cleared his empty plate, he told her it was the best braciole he'd ever had, and the way he said it made her believe he meant it. "Would you like dessert?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have tiramisu tonight. My mother made it fresh this afternoon." "How could I say no to that?" He set down his napkin. "But only if you'll sit down for a minute and tell me about this place." Her heart stuttered. "Tell you about the restaurant, if you have time." He glanced around the now nearly empty dining room. The family had left, and the elderly couple was finishing up their coffee. "I'd like to know more about the history. You mentioned your grandparents earlier, but I don't know the whole story." Clara should have said no. She had dishes to wash, prep work to finish, a dozen other tasks that waited at the end of every shift. But something in his expression, an openness and genuine curiosity, made her pull out the chair across from him and sit down. "My grandparents came from a small town near Naples in 1962, she began, surprised at how easily the words came. "They had nothing. My grandfather worked construction, my grandmother cleaned houses, but they saved every penny, and in 1994 they bought this place. It was a failed diner then, nearly condemned. They rebuilt it themselves, my grandfather doing all the construction work on weekends, my grandmother painting and decorating." Marcus listened without interrupting, his full attention on her in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "They ran it together for 8 years before my grandfather had a heart attack. He died right there in the kitchen, making sauce for the dinner rush." Clara's throat tightened the way it always did when she reached this part of the story. "My grandmother kept it going for another 3 years, but it was too much for one person. She was about to sell when my father convinced her to let him take over. He'd been working as an accountant, hated every minute of it. This place was his dream made real. And your mother, she was a teacher, met my father when he catered a school event. She gave up teaching to help run the restaurant." Clara smiled at the memory. "She says it was the best decision she ever made, even though the hours are worse and the pay is terrible. Some things are worth more than money." Marcus spoke quietly but with conviction. "Building something that matters, feeding people, creating a space where families make memories. That has value that can't be measured." Clara studied him, really looked at him for the first time without pretending she was just doing her job. He had strong features, a jaw that suggested determination, but also small details that made him human. A small scar near his left eyebrow, slightly crooked bottom teeth that his smile revealed, calluses on his hands that seemed out of place with his expensive clothes. "What do you do?" she asked, then immediately felt embarrassed. "I'm sorry, that's personal. You don't have to answer." "I don't mind." He ran his finger along the rim of his wine glass. "I run a company, manufacturing mostly. We make components for larger corporations, things most people never see but that keep other things running. Factories in 3 states, about 800 employees, lots of meetings and travel and stress." "That sounds important. It's necessary." He met her eyes. "But it's not the same as what you do here. I keep a business running. You keep a legacy alive. There's a difference." Before Clara could respond, her mother appeared with a generous slice of tiramisu and 2 forks. She set it down between them with a meaningful look at Clara before disappearing back into the kitchen. "Your mother is not subtle," Marcus said with amusement. Clara felt her face heat. "She means well, and she makes incredible tiramisu, so you should definitely try it." They shared the dessert in companionable silence, and Clara was surprised at how comfortable it felt, sitting across from this man who was essentially a stranger, but somehow didn't feel like one. He asked about her brother Marco, about whether she'd always wanted to work in the restaurant, about her dreams beyond these walls. She found herself being honest in a way she rarely was with anyone. "I love this place," she admitted, "but sometimes I wonder what else is out there. I went to culinary school, did a year at a restaurant downtown. It was exciting and new, and I learned so much. But then my father got sick and I came home to help. He died 6 months later, cancer. I'm sorry. It's been 3 years now. Some days are harder than others." She took a sip of water. "My mother and brother, they need me here, and most days I'm happy to be here. This is my family's heart, you know. Everything we are, everything we've built, it's in these walls. But sometimes you wonder about the roads not taken." "Exactly." She looked at him with surprise. "Yes, exactly that." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression distant. "I understand that feeling more than you might think." Before she could ask what he meant, the elderly couple called for their check. Clara excused herself to handle it, and by the time she returned, Marcus had finished the tiramisu and was pulling out his wallet. "What do I owe you?" he asked. She calculated quickly. $32. He handed her 2 50s. "Keep the change. That's too much." "It's not nearly enough for the conversation." He stood, pulling on his coat. "Thank you, Clara, for the meal and for the company." "You're welcome." She clutched the bills, feeling the weight of his generosity, and something else, something unnamed. "Will we see you next week?" The question came out before she could stop it, too revealing, too hopeful, but Marcus just smiled. "Same time," he said. "I wouldn't miss it." He left, and Clara watched through the window as he walked to his car, a solitary figure in the parking lot. When she turned back, her mother was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and a knowing look on her face. "Don't," Clara warned. "I didn't say anything. You're thinking it." Rosa shrugged. "I'm thinking that man just tipped you $38 on a $32 meal and looked at you like you hung the moon. But what do I know? I'm just your mother." Clara didn't respond because there was nothing to say. She went back to the kitchen and threw herself into cleaning, scrubbing pots and wiping down surfaces until everything gleamed. But even as her hands worked, her mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation, the way Marcus had listened, the feeling of sitting across from him and being truly seen. Thursday became the day Clara both anticipated and dreaded. The week stretched out before it, each day just marking time until 6:15, when Marcus's Mercedes would pull into the parking lot. She found herself checking her reflection more often, choosing her clothes more carefully, practicing what she might say if he asked her to sit with him again. He came the next Thursday, and the Thursday after that. Sometimes they had brief conversations, sometimes just polite exchanges. But there was always something, a moment of connection, a shared smile, a look that lasted a beat too long. 6 weeks into his visits, a total of 13 Thursdays, Rosa's kitchen had a rare busy night. Every table was full, the kitchen was chaos, and Clara was sweating through her dress as she juggled orders and tried to keep the flow moving. Marco had cut his hand on a knife and was getting stitches at urgent care, leaving them short-staffed at the worst possible time. When Marcus arrived at his usual time, there was nowhere for him to sit. Clara saw him standing in the doorway, scanning the crowded room, and her heart sank. This was it. This was the night he'd realize coming here wasn't worth the hassle and stop coming. But instead of leaving, he rolled up his sleeves and approached the counter. "You look like you could use some help." Clara stared at him. "What?" "I'm pretty good at clearing tables and running food." He was already tying on one of their spare aprons, the black fabric looking ridiculous over his expensive shirt and slacks. "Just point me in the right direction." "You can't. You're a customer, and I'm a guy who knows how to work, and you need hands." He grabbed a tub for dirty dishes. "Which tables need clearing?" Clara wanted to argue, but a table of 6 had just finished and another family was waiting by the door. 3 and 5, she said, giving in. "But you really don't have to do this." "I know." He was already moving toward table 3, stacking plates with efficient movements that suggested this wasn't his first time bussing tables. "That's why I want to." For the next 2 hours, Marcus worked alongside them. He cleared tables, ran food from the kitchen, refilled water glasses, and even helped Rosa plate dishes when the orders backed up. He moved through the chaos with calm competence, anticipating needs and jumping in wherever he was required. Customers assumed he was family, and he never corrected them. By 8:30, the rush had finally subsided. The last customers were finishing their meals, and the dining room had returned to its usual quiet hum. Clara collapsed into a chair, her feet aching and her back screaming, and found Marcus sitting across from her, looking equally exhausted. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate. "I don't know what we would have done without you. You would have managed." He loosened his tie, which he'd somehow kept on through the entire rush. "But I'm glad I could help." Rosa emerged from the kitchen with 2 plates of pasta and set them down firmly in front of Marcus and Clara. "Eat," she commanded. "Both of you. No arguments." She disappeared again before either could respond. Clara picked up her fork, suddenly ravenous. They ate in comfortable silence, too tired for conversation, but the quiet felt right, natural. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after she'd cleared half her plate. Marcus looked up. "Anything?" "Why do you keep coming here?" The question had been building for weeks, months now. "And don't say it's the food." "The food is good, but it's not drive across the city every Thursday for 3 months good. There are closer restaurants, fancier restaurants, so why here? Why us?" He set down his fork and looked at her for a long moment. "Do you want the simple answer or the honest one?" "The honest one." "The first time I came here, it was random. I had a meeting that ran late, I was starving, and this place was on the way back to my apartment. I expected mediocre food and quick service so I could get home and collapse." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But then you brought me towels because I was soaked from the snow. And you smiled at me like I was a person, not a wallet. And the food was incredible, real and honest and made with care. For 2 hours, I sat in this restaurant and felt something I hadn't felt in years." "What?" "Peace." The word hung between them, simple and profound. "My life is complicated, Clara. I run a company that demands everything from me. I make decisions that affect hundreds of people every day. I live in an apartment that costs a fortune but feels empty. I date women who are more interested in my portfolio than my personality, and I'm tired. I'm so damn tired of all of it." Clara's heart was pounding, but she stayed quiet, letting him continue. "But here in this place I can just be Marcus. Not Marcus Everett, CEO, not the guy who has to have all the answers, just a man eating good food in a restaurant that feels like home." He met her eyes. "And then there's you." "Me, you," he confirmed. "The way you talk about your family with such love. The way you work yourself to exhaustion because this place matters to you. The way you actually listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. You're real, Clara. And that's so rare in my world that I started looking forward to Thursdays like a kid counting down to Christmas." Clara couldn't breathe. The restaurant had gone silent around them, or maybe it just seemed that way because all she could focus on was Marcus and the vulnerability in his expression. "I started coming here for the food," he continued, "but I kept coming back for you, and if that makes you uncomfortable, if you want me to stop, I will. But you asked for honesty, and that's the truth." She should have been shocked, should have needed time to process. But instead, she felt a rush of relief so powerful it almost made her dizzy. "I check the parking lot every Thursday at 6, she admitted. "And on the weeks when something kept you away, the whole night felt wrong. My mother keeps telling me to ask you why you keep coming, and I've been too scared because I was afraid the answer would be something ordinary, something that had nothing to do with me." Marcus reached across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation. Clara looked at it for a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and it felt like something clicking into place. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I don't know." He rubbed his thumb across her knuckles. "I'm not good at this, the relationship thing. My last girlfriend told me I'm married to my work and filed for permanent separation. She wasn't wrong. And I haven't had time to date in 3 years. Between the restaurant and taking care of my mother and trying to keep this place afloat, there's nothing left at the end of the day." Clara squeezed his hand. "But I don't want you to stop coming on Thursdays." "I won't." His voice was firm, a promise. "But I'd like to see you on other days, too. If you're open to that." Clara thought about her schedule, the endless demands of the restaurant, the 1,000 reasons why this was complicated. Then she looked at Marcus, at this successful, serious man who'd spent his evening bussing tables because she needed help, who drove across the city every week just to eat her family's food and see her face, who looked at her like she was worth the effort. "I'd like that," she said. "Very much." They sat there holding hands across the table like teenagers, until Rosa emerged from the kitchen and cleared her throat loudly. "I'm locking up in 10 minutes, she announced, but she was smiling. "Unless you two plan to stay here all night staring at each other." Marcus stood, still holding Clara's hand, and pulled her up beside him. "I should go. But Clara, can I take you to dinner tomorrow? Somewhere where you're not the one cooking." "I work tomorrow," she said, then caught herself. "But I could take the night off. Marco can handle it with Ma." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." And she was. For the first time in years, she was choosing something for herself, something that had nothing to do with duty or obligation or keeping her family's dream alive. Marcus left with plans to pick her up at 7 the next evening. After he was gone, Clara helped her mother clean up, both of them working in loaded silence until Rosa finally spoke. "That man is in love with you." Clara dropped the plate she was washing. It clattered in the sink but didn't break. "Ma, that's ridiculous. We barely know each other." "I know what I see. And I see the way he looks at you, the way he showed up and worked for 2 hours without asking for anything in return." Rosa handed her a dish towel. "More importantly, I see the way you look at him, like he's air and you've been holding your breath for a long time." Clara couldn't deny it. "It's fast, too fast. Your father and I knew after 2 weeks. When it's right, it's right." Rosa touched her daughter's cheek gently. "You deserve happiness, baby girl. You've put your life on hold for this family, for this restaurant. But we'll be fine if you take some time for yourself. More than fine." That night, Clara lay in bed in her small apartment above the restaurant and allowed herself to think about possibilities, about what it might mean to have something outside these walls. About a man with kind eyes and strong hands who looked at her like she mattered. Marcus picked her up the next evening driving a different car, a BMW that was somehow even more expensive looking than the Mercedes. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, more casual than she'd ever seen him, and he looked nervous in a way that made her relax. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door. Clara had agonized over her outfit, finally settling on a simple blue dress and heels that made her legs look longer. "Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." He took her to a small Italian place on the other side of the city, the kind of restaurant with white tablecloths and soft lighting and prices that probably required taking out a loan. But despite the fancy atmosphere, Marcus kept her laughing with stories about disastrous business meetings and the time he'd accidentally sent a company-wide email that was meant only for his assistant. "They never let me forget it," he said, grinning. "Every presentation I give, someone always asks if I check the recipient list first." "What did the email say?" Clara asked, sipping the wine he'd ordered. "That's classified information. You'll have to get at least 3 more dates in before I reveal company secrets." 3 more. "Pretty confident." "Hopeful," he corrected. "There's a difference." They talked through dinner, through dessert, through coffee that grew cold while they sat absorbed in conversation. Clara learned that Marcus had grown up in the Midwest, that he'd built his company from almost nothing after college, that he loved old movies and terrible science fiction novels, and had a younger sister who lived in California and never called enough. Marcus learned that Clara had wanted to be a ballerina when she was 5, that she could speak Italian fluently but never got to use it, that she secretly wrote recipes in a notebook and dreamed of maybe publishing a cookbook someday. "You should do it," he said seriously. "Your family's recipes deserve to be shared beyond the restaurant. It's just a dream. I wouldn't even know where to start. You start by writing them down. Then you find a publisher or self-publish. I know people who could help if you want." It was so easy for him to say, like anything was possible with enough determination. And maybe in his world it was. But Clara's world was different, built on responsibilities and limitations. "I'll think about it," she said, and meant it. Marcus drove her home at midnight, parking in the empty restaurant lot. The building was dark, closed for the night, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. "I had a great time," Clara said, and the words felt too simple for what she was feeling. This had been the first real date she'd had in years, and it had been perfect. Easy and comfortable and exciting all at once. "So did I." Marcus turned toward her, his expression serious in the dim light. "Can I be honest with you about something?" Her stomach flipped. "Of course." "I'm not good at this. Dating, relationships, all of it. I work too much and I'm terrible at sharing my feelings, and my last 3 relationships ended badly." He took a breath. "But with you, I want to try. Really try. Because what I feel when I'm with you, it's not something I want to lose." Clara's heart was racing. "What do you feel?" "Like I can breathe. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He reached over and took her hand. Like maybe all the Thursday nights were leading up to something important. She leaned across the console and kissed him. It was impulsive and probably too fast, but the moment her lips met his, she knew it was exactly right. Marcus kissed her back with a gentle intensity that made her head spin, one hand coming up to cup her face with such tenderness that she felt tears prick her eyes. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Wow," Clara whispered. "Yeah." Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Wow." They sat like that for a long moment, just being close, before Clara reluctantly pulled back. "I should go in, early morning tomorrow, I know." He kissed her once more, soft and brief. "Can I see you this week, before Thursday?" "Yes." She didn't have to think about it. "Call me." She floated up the stairs to her apartment, touching her lips and replaying every moment. Inside, she leaned against the closed door and grinned at nothing, feeling like a teenager with her first crush. This was how it started, a pattern that quickly became the foundation of her life. Marcus called the next day, and they talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything. He came to the restaurant on Thursday as always, but now she sat with him through his whole meal, stealing kisses in the kitchen when her mother wasn't looking. They went out on Saturday, a movie and walk through the park that was just starting to show signs of early spring. 2 weeks became a month. 1 month became 2. Clara met Marcus's sister via video call and liked her immediately. Marcus met Marco in person and they bonded over sports and terrible jokes. Rosa adopted Marcus as an honorary son and started making his favorite dishes without him having to order. It should have been perfect, and mostly it was, but there were complications. Marcus worked constantly. He'd cancel plans at the last minute because of conference calls with overseas clients. He'd fall asleep during movies because he'd been up since 4 in the morning dealing with factory issues. He traveled at least twice a month, sometimes for days at a time, and even when he was physically present, Clara could see his mind churning with business problems, and Clara's life was equally demanding. The restaurant required endless attention. The new oven they'd been saving for died completely, requiring an emergency replacement they couldn't afford. Marco broke up with his girlfriend and spiraled into depression, missing shifts and leaving Clara to cover. Rosa developed arthritis in her hands, making it harder for her to work the long hours the restaurant demanded. They tried. They really tried. But 3 months into their relationship, the cracks started showing. "I can't do this tonight," Clara said into her phone, standing in the restaurant's walk-in freezer because it was the only place she could have a private conversation. "Marco didn't show up again, and we have a party of 20 coming in an hour. I'm sorry." Marcus was silent for a moment. "That's the 3rd time this month." I know, and I hate it, but what am I supposed to do? This is my family's livelihood. I can't just walk away when things get hard." "I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to trust that they can handle one night without you." His voice was tight with frustration. "I have tickets to this thing. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. Then go without me." "I don't want to go without you. I want to spend time with my girlfriend, which is apparently too much to ask." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is that I'm always the one bending, always the one rearranging my schedule, always the one understanding when you cancel or cut our time short." He sighed heavily. "I have demands on my time too, Clara. I have a company that needs me. But I make you a priority because you matter to me. And you don't think you matter to me. I think I matter when it's convenient, when your family doesn't need you more." The words hit like a slap. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" He sounded tired now, the anger draining into something sadder. "Look, forget it. Go handle the party. We'll talk later." He hung up before she could respond. Clara stood in the freezer with the phone still pressed to her ear, feeling cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. They did talk later, both of them apologizing, both of them trying to understand. But the fundamental problem remained. They were two people who lived in different worlds with different priorities, and bridging that gap was harder than either had anticipated. A week after their fight, Marcus showed up at the restaurant on a Monday, which wasn't his usual day. Clara was in the kitchen making fresh pasta, her hands covered in flour, when Marco called her out. "You have a visitor," her brother said with a meaningful look. Marcus was sitting at his usual table, still wearing his suit from work, his tie slightly loosened. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Clara sat down across from him, not bothering to wipe off the flour. "What's wrong?" "I have to go to Chicago. There's a problem with one of our factories, union issues that require in-person attention." He rubbed his face. "I'll be gone for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer." 2 weeks felt like forever. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning." Tomorrow, Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. And you're just telling me now. I found out this afternoon. I came straight here after work. He reached across the table, but she didn't take his hand. Clara, I know the timing is terrible, but this isn't something I can delegate. If I don't handle this, we could lose the entire facility. That's 300 jobs, she understood. Of course she understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. 2 weeks. Maybe longer. I'll call every day, video chat when I can. Sure. She stood up, needing distance. I should get back to work. Clara, come on. He stood too, frustration clear in his voice. Don't do this. Do what? I said okay, you have to go, I get it. You're shutting down, I can see it happening. He moved around the table toward her. Talk to me. What do you want me to say? She crossed her arms, defensive. That I'm upset you're leaving. Fine, I'm upset. But you have responsibilities and so do I, and apparently neither of us is very good at balancing both. So what, we just give up? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and terrifying. Clara looked at this man she'd come to care about so much, this serious CEO who helped bust tables and remembered details about her dreams, and kissed her like she was precious. She thought about Thursday nights and shared tiramisu and the feeling of his hand in hers. No, she said quietly. We don't give up. Marcus closed the distance between them and pulled her into a hug. Clara pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent, trying to memorize the feeling of being held by him. We'll figure this out, he said into her hair. I promise. We just need to get through this rough patch. She wanted to believe him. She held on tighter and chose to have faith. Marcus left for Chicago and the 2 weeks stretched into 3, then 4. They talked on the phone every night, but the conversations grew shorter. Both of them too tired to do more than exchange surface details about their days. Video calls were worse. The connection often spotty, leaving them talking over each other or staring at frozen screens. The restaurant went through its own crisis. A fire inspection revealed code violations that required expensive fixes. They had to shut down for 5 days to make repairs, losing crucial revenue. Rosa's arthritis got worse, requiring her to cut back her hours. Clara found herself working 16-hour days, falling into bed too exhausted to think, waking up to do it all again. When Marcus finally returned after 5 weeks, Clara barely recognized the man who walked into the restaurant on a Thursday evening. He'd lost weight, looked haggard, and there was a new hardness around his eyes. Hey, she said, feeling suddenly shy around this man who'd been her boyfriend but now felt like a stranger. Hey. He sat down at his usual table and the gesture felt both familiar and wrong. It's good to see you. They tried to pick up where they'd left off, but it was like starting over. The easy comfort was gone, replaced by awkward pauses and careful conversations. Marcus ordered the chicken parmesan, but he barely touched it. How's your mother? He asked. Managing. The arthritis is hard on her, but she refuses to slow down. And the restaurant, we're recovering from the shutdown. It was expensive, but we passed the re-inspection. Clara pushed food around her own plate. How was Chicago? Complicated. We managed to negotiate with the union, but it required some major concessions, and I had to let go of the facility manager, which was brutal. He set down his fork. I'm going to have to go back next month to check on things. Clara's stomach dropped. Next month? I know, I'm sorry. But I can't just abandon the situation now. They were the same words in different clothes, the same impossible situation playing out on repeat. Clara looked at Marcus and saw her future stretched out before her. Weeks of separation, missed dates, conversations cut short by work demands on both sides, always understanding but never quite connecting. This isn't working, she said quietly. Marcus froze. What? Us? This? She gestured between them. We keep trying, but it's not enough. You have your company, I have my restaurant, and there's no middle ground. We're just making each other miserable. I'm not miserable." But his voice lacked conviction. "You're not happy either." Clara felt tears building but refused to let them fall. "And neither am I. Not really. I miss you even when you're sitting right in front of me. And I'm tired, Marcus. I'm so tired of feeling like I'm always choosing between you and my family, always disappointing someone." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. "So that's it, we just quit." "I don't want to quit, but I also don't know how to make this work." A tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. "Do you?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was answer enough. Clara stood up, her legs shaking. "I think you should go. Clara, please." Her voice broke. "Just go." He left. Clara watched his car pull out of the parking lot and told herself this was the right decision, the practical decision. They'd been kidding themselves, thinking they could bridge the gap between their worlds. She went back to the kitchen and broke down. Rosa found her sitting on the floor by the prep counter, sobbing into her flour-covered hands, and just held her while she cried. The weeks after the breakup were gray. Clara threw herself into work with even more intensity, staying at the restaurant until midnight, coming back at dawn. She avoided table by the window, couldn't look at it without remembering Marcus sitting there with his careful smile and patient eyes. Thursday nights were the worst. 6:15 would come and she'd catch herself glancing at the parking lot, expecting to see his car. But it was never there. Rosa worried. Marco tried to cheer her up with terrible jokes and brotherly affection. Regular customers asked where her young man had gone, and she gave vague answers about scheduling conflicts. 6 weeks after the breakup, Clara was closing up late on a Wednesday night when someone knocked on the door. She almost ignored it, but something made her look up. Marcus stood on the other side of the glass. Her heart stopped. She walked to the door on autopilot and unlocked it. "We're closed." "I know." He looked different, lighter somehow despite the serious expression. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Marcus walked to his usual table and sat down, and she found herself sitting across from him, just like that first night when he'd asked about the family photos. "I quit my job," he said. Clara's mind went blank. "You what?" "I quit. Gave 6 weeks' notice, helped transition my replacement, signed my final paperwork today." He leaned back in the chair. "I don't work for Everett Manufacturing anymore. But that's your company, you built it. And now I sold it. To a larger corporation that will treat my employees well and keep the factories running." He met her eyes. It was time. Clara couldn't process what she was hearing. "I don't understand." "I was miserable, Clara. I've been miserable for years, actually, but I didn't realize it until I met you. Until I sat in this restaurant every Thursday and felt what it was like to actually enjoy my life." He leaned forward, intensity in every line of his body. "When we broke up, I went back to Chicago and worked myself into the ground, trying to prove that the company was worth it, worth losing you. And I couldn't do it. Every meeting, every decision, I kept thinking, what's the point? I was building something that didn't make me happy, surrounding myself with people who didn't really know me, living a life that looked successful but felt empty. So you just walked away." "I sold the company for more money than I'll ever spend, yes. And now I'm free to figure out what I actually want to do with my life." He smiled, and it was genuine. "I'm thinking maybe something with food. Maybe I could help restaurants with their business models, help them stay afloat without sacrificing what makes them special. Or maybe I'll go to culinary school, learn to actually cook instead of just eating. I don't know yet. But I know I want to spend my Thursdays at Rosa's kitchen if you'll let me, and my Fridays and Saturdays and every other day you'll have me." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "You sold your company." "I restructured my life," he corrected, "because I finally figured out what matters." And it's not profit margins or factory efficiency or building an empire. It's this. He reached across the table and took her hand. It's you. It's sitting in this restaurant and feeling at home. It's being with someone who challenges me and supports me and makes me want to be better. Marcus, I'm not asking you to change anything about your life, he continued. I know this restaurant is your family's legacy, and I would never ask you to walk away from that, but I'm hoping you might have room for me in your life. For real this time, not as an addition you have to squeeze in, but as someone who understands what you're building because I want to help you build it. Clara was full on crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also free and in love with you, which feels pretty good actually. Her heart stuttered. What did you say? I love you. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I've loved you since you sat down and told me about your grandparents and looked at me like I was worth listening to. I loved you when you let me bus tables during your rush. I loved you when we fought about priorities because it meant you cared enough to fight. And I love you now, sitting here with flour in your hair and exhaustion in your eyes, still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Clara couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. Everything she'd thought was impossible was sitting right in front of her, offering himself without reservations. You don't have to say it back, Marcus said quickly. I know this is a lot and maybe too fast, and I love you too. The words burst out of her. I've been miserable without you. Everything felt wrong, even the work I usually love. My mother kept telling me to call you and I wanted to, but I didn't know how to fix the fundamental problem. And now you went and solved it by doing something crazy. She laughed through her tears. You really sold your company. I really did. Do you want to see the paperwork? I have it in my car. I believe you. She squeezed his hand. I just can't believe you did it for me. I did it for me too, for us. He pulled her to her feet and around the table, drawing her close. I want Thursday nights and lazy Sunday mornings and fights about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want to meet your whole family and have them tell me embarrassing stories about you. I want to figure out how to help this restaurant thrive without losing what makes it special. I want everything, Clara, with you. She kissed him, and it felt like coming home. Like every Thursday evening for the past months had been leading to this moment. This perfect collision of two lives that had seemed incompatible but somehow fit together anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. So, is that a yes? That's a yes to all of it. Clara felt lighter than she had in months, but I have one condition. Name it. You still have to come in every Thursday at 6:15 and order something from the menu. It's tradition. Marcus grinned. I think I can manage that. They stood in the empty restaurant, holding each other, while outside the world continued spinning. But in that moment, they had everything they needed. Each other, a shared dream and the beginning of something lasting. Time has a way of proving whether choices were right or wrong. 6 months after Marcus sold his company, he opened a consulting business helping family-owned restaurants modernize while maintaining their character. He worked from a small office above Rosa's kitchen, which Rosa had insisted on renting to him for $1 a month. Clara would bring him lunch, and he'd help with the dinner rush, the perfect balance of independence and togetherness. Rosa's arthritis stabilized with new treatment, and with Marcus's business expertise, they were able to hire additional staff, taking pressure off the family. Marco met someone new, a teacher who brought him out of his depression and made him smile again. The restaurant thrived, written up in local magazines as a hidden gem, bringing in new customers while keeping their regulars happy. On a Thursday evening exactly 1 year after Marcus had shown up to tell Clara he'd quit his job, he arrived at the restaurant at 6:15 as always. But instead of sitting at his usual table, he got down on one knee in the middle of the dining room. "Clara Romano," he said, pulling out a ring box, "will you marry me?" The restaurant went completely silent. Every customer stopped eating. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, already crying. Marco pulled out his phone to record. Clara looked at this man who'd driven across the city every week because her family's restaurant felt like home, who'd helped bus tables and learned to make pasta and reorganize their inventory system. This man who loved her enough to restructure his entire life, who understood that her family and her work were part of who she was, who made every day brighter just by existing in her world. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her while their makeshift family cheered. It was perfect and chaotic and exactly right. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the restaurant on a Sunday when it was closed. Rosa catered, of course, with Marco's girlfriend helping coordinate. Marcus's sister flew in from California and immediately bonded with Clara's cousins. They danced between the tables where they'd fallen in love, surrounded by family photos and the smell of marinara sauce and everything that mattered. 2 years after the wedding, Clara published her cookbook, a collection of her family's recipes with stories about the restaurant woven throughout. Marcus had connected her with a publisher, but she'd done all the work herself, writing late at night after the dinner shift. The book was a modest success, selling enough that she started thinking about a second volume. 3 years after the wedding, Rosa decided to retire, handing over the restaurant to Clara and Marco officially. It was an emotional transition, but Rosa was ready to spend her time spoiling her first grandchild, a daughter Clara and Marcus named Rosa Elena, after both of their grandmothers. 5 years after Marcus first walked into Rosa's family kitchen on that snowy January evening, he sat at his usual table holding his daughter while Clara brought out plates of food for the family dinner they hosted every Thursday. Marco was there with his wife, now pregnant with twins. Rosa was there with her sister, Clara's aunt, both of them arguing good-naturedly about the proper way to make risotto. Clara watched her family, her restaurant, her life, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it made her eyes sting. This place that had felt like a burden had become a gift. The man who'd been a stranger had become her everything. The future that had seemed impossible had unfolded into something better than she'd imagined. Marcus looked up and caught her staring. "What are you thinking about?" "Thursday nights," she said, sitting beside him and kissing their daughter's dark hair. "And how I'm glad you kept coming back. Best decision I ever made." He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Well, that and the chicken parmesan, that's a close second." Clara laughed and leaned into him, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. Outside, the city moved on with its rush and noise. But inside Rosa's family kitchen, surrounded by love and laughter and the smell of good food, Clara and Marcus had found exactly what they'd been searching for, a place to belong together. Little Rosa Elena started fussing, and Marcus stood to walk her around the restaurant, bouncing her gently and pointing out the family photos on the walls. "That's your great-grandfather," he said softly, "and that's your grandmother when she was young. This is your family's legacy, sweetheart. Someday, if you want, all of this can be yours." Clara watched her husband teaching their daughter about the restaurant's history, about the sacrifices and dreams that had built these walls. She thought about her grandparents who'd risked everything for a better life, her father who'd chosen passion over security, her mother who'd given up a career to help build something lasting. And she thought about Marcus, who'd chosen love over empire, who'd proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what you're supposed to want and reach for what actually makes you happy. "Hey," Rosa called from the kitchen doorway. "Are we eating, or are we just going to stand around looking sentimental all night?" Everyone laughed and moved toward the big table Marco had set up in the center of the dining room. They gathered together, passing plates and pouring wine and talking over each other in the chaotic way of families who love each other too much to stay quiet. Marcus took his seat beside Clara, their daughter now sleeping peacefully in her carrier. He reached under the table and laced his fingers through hers, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. "Thank you," she whispered, "just for him." "For what?" "For keeping coming back. For not giving up. For choosing us." "Always," he said, and kissed her temple. "Every Thursday and every day in between." They ate together as the evening deepened outside, the restaurant warm and bright against the darkness. And if anyone had walked by and looked through the window, they would have seen what Marcus had seen that very first night. A family bound together by love and food and stubborn determination, building something that would last for generations. The restaurant would go on. The recipes would be passed down. Little Rosa would grow up learning to make pasta from her grandmother, business skills from her father, and the importance of love and legacy from both her parents. And every Thursday at 6:15, no matter how busy life got or what challenges they faced, Marcus would make sure to sit at that table by the window with his family and remember the night he'd walked in looking for shelter from a storm and found home instead. That was the real recipe, the one that couldn't be written down or passed along. Take equal parts hope and hard work, add a generous helping of courage, mix it all together with love, and serve it warm to anyone who walks through your door. Some might just eat and leave. But others, the special ones, they'll keep coming back. And if you're very lucky, they'll stay forever. Clara looked around the table at her family, her restaurant, her life, and knew she was the luckiest person alive. Not because everything was perfect, but because she'd found something worth fighting for and someone to fight alongside. Marcus caught her staring again and raised his wine glass. To Thursday nights. Everyone raised their glasses. To Thursday nights, they echoed. Clara clinked her glass against Marcus's and took a sip, tasting not just the wine but everything it represented. Love found in unexpected places, dreams that evolved and adapted, family that welcomed newcomers, and traditions that made room for change. The meal continued with laughter and stories, with second helpings and arguments about who made the best lasagna. And later, after everyone had eaten too much and the dishes were cleared and goodbyes were said, Clara and Marcus walked upstairs to their apartment with their sleeping daughter. They stood in the kitchen of their small home above the restaurant, swaying together in the quiet darkness, and Clara rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happy?" he asked. "Incredibly," she answered. "You, more than I ever thought possible." And it was true. Marcus Everett, who'd once measured his worth in profit margins and quarterly reports, had found something immeasurably more valuable in a small family restaurant, and the woman who'd been brave enough to ask why he kept coming back. The answer, he'd learned, was simple. Because some places feel like home from the very first moment, and some people are worth rearranging your entire world to be near. You just had to be smart enough to recognize it when it happened and brave enough to hold on tight. Thursday nights had become the foundation of their love story, but every day was a gift now. Every morning waking up beside Clara, every evening helping in the restaurant, every moment with their daughter, every shared dream and challenge overcome together. It wasn't always easy. Running a restaurant never was, and balancing work and family required constant effort. But they'd learned to communicate better, to make time for each other, to remember that they were stronger together than apart. And on the hardest days, when Clara was exhausted from a double shift or Marcus was stressed about a client, they'd find each other in the quiet moments and remember that Thursday evening when everything changed. When a CEO stopped pretending his work was enough, and a restaurant owner stopped hiding in the kitchen. When two people chose to be brave enough to want more, that was their real legacy, more than recipes or businesses or anything they could build with their hands. It was the choice to love fully, to prioritize what mattered, to create a life that was rich in the ways that actually counted. Marcus kissed the top of Clara's head. "We should probably get some sleep. Rosa Elena will be up in a few hours." "5 more minutes," Clara said, holding on tighter. "I just want to stand here with you for 5 more minutes." So they did, swaying in the darkness above the restaurant where they'd met, where they'd fallen in love, where they'd built something lasting. And when they finally went to bed, they fell asleep wrapped around each other, grateful for Thursday nights and second chances and love that was patient enough to wait for the right person to walk through the door. Years from now, when their daughter was grown and running the restaurant herself, she'd ask her parents how they knew they were meant to be together. And Marcus and Clara would smile at each other across whatever table they were sitting at, and Marcus would say, "I just kept showing up." And Clara would add, "And I finally got brave enough to ask why." And that would be enough, because the best love stories don't need complicated explanations. They just need two people willing to choose each other, day after day, Thursday after Thursday, for the rest of their lives.